Hello everybody! I know this ain't my usual subject, but man, I am in love with Deltarune. And since we know it'll be a while before we get any more Deltarune content, I decided to throw my hat into the ring. This video will be crammed full of everything we have yet to learn about the future of Deltarune, including location of the Dark Fountains, secret bosses, identity of the night, eggs, endings, weird route changes, release dates, and other random predictions, theories, and observations. You'll also likely notice that the background footage sucks ass. That's not because I'm a casual, I just have never played Undertale or Deltarune on my PC. I usually play on a Switch, but recording on a Switch is both difficult as hell and it looks like shit, so I'm not gonna do that. Remember that most of these are just silly predictions and I'd be fine with pretty much all of them being false. But with that said, let's just jump right into it. Hey everybody, post-audio editing Banana Bread Man here. I'm just here to warn you, if you're not a Deltarune fan, this video will sound like complete nonsense. I'm talking actual insanity. If you want to stay, it's probably because you're as far into the Deltarune as I am, or it's because you want to hear a crazy person yap about nonsense for an hour. Regardless, it'll be a fun time. To start, I'll go over some basic assumptions that I'm working with. 1. This voice that we see during the Goner Maker, end of chapters, occasional Twitter thread, PlayStation trophies, and when you lose to the night, is Gaster. He speaks in all caps, the Goner Maker theme is called Another Hymn, again in all caps, plus the theme references hymn.png, which is literally typed in all caps wingdings. 2. Chris is working with the night. This is a pretty cut and dry case. Chris is knighted by the night, they don't attack it if you make it to the end of the corridor at the start of the Chapter 4 Dark Worlds, they think of Jockington so you can't get the description of their identity if you choose to think of the night, and they only turn the doorknob instead of opening the door so we can't see who the night is in the light world. 3rd, Carol is probably working with the night. This is kinda told to us. Carol is said to have access to the shelter, the knight has access to the shelter. Carol seems to be this voice on the phone who is working with Chris. I know they have a different talk sound and text box when she calls us during the weird route, but 1, that call replaces the call during the normal ending, and 2, she comes home immediately after the voice says, "I'll be right there." Keywording is I'll. Maybe the ellipsis is saying that we missed a word or two in there, and it's really saying I'll be sending someone right there, but Occam's razor, man. Anyways, Carol specifically being this voice on the phone doesn't matter as much as the idea that Carol is working with the Knight and Chris. And finally, Gaster has some bullshit to do with the Dark Worlds. Using your phone gets you the Entry 17 audio, the shelter, which clearly holds some kind of Dark World, has Entry 17's audio playing by it, slowed by 666%, and Gaster loves his sixes, and Entry 17 is pretty obviously talking about Dark Worlds with the mentions of darker, darker, yet darker, and photon readings negative, which implies something that is darker than anything without light, which is what the Dark Worlds are described to be in Chapter 3. These aren't all the assumptions that I'm working with, but these are the most needed bits of background knowledge. Anything else should be explained as I go. With that said, I'll start us off with a quick easy theory. Theory number 1, late night's double meaning. Chapter 3 is called Late Night. This is both because it is literally late at night, and because the night is late to the Dark World. That's why the crystal bosses in chapters 3 and 4 are so different from Jevil and Spamton. It's because the knight didn't have the chance to pass off the shadow crystal to someone else. In chapter 3, Tina didn't give us the unused 3rd board, so the knight couldn't pass the crystal off to Ram, who wants Chris's freedom from the soul. You can see a continuation of this in chapter 4, where the shadow crystal was just quickly placed at Gerson's desk. Obviously, the knight knew we were close behind them, and just dropped it somewhere they knew we'd go. This leads to something I've kind of noticed about the Shadow Crystal bosses. In the first 2 chapters, the secret bosses seem to get a call or talk to a mysterious figure who's probably like friend. Jevil learns that he doesn't matter, that he has no bearing on the prophecy from this mysterious fellow, then is given the crystal from the knight. He then tells King about the knight and is trapped in his little freedom. Spamton gets the call from Mike, learns how to be a big shot, learns of the Neo body in the basement which the knight stored a crystal in, loses his mic, runs off. Then the Addison hears garbage noise in the receiver, which is the same way the Entry 17 audio is described as when heard through the cell phone. These 2 are examples of how the knight / Gaster / friend or whatever wants to pass off these crystals. But you know, country girls make do. That's enough theories for now. I want to get into the Chapter 5 predictions. Chapter 5 is the chapter we're given the most information about, which makes sense as chapters 3, 4, and 5 were originally planned to release at the same time. I'm assuming that this was changed so that it could be a launch title for the Switch 2. Anyways, here's my prediction for the rough format of Deltarune Chapter 5. We start the chapter waking up to the sound of chatter downstairs, with Sans making Toriel, and us, breakfast. This will make Chris upset. We leave the house to explore the town, setting up for the festival. We go down to the church and talk to Father Alvin about the place being trashed by someone who knew his father. Despite the damage, he seems pretty okay with everything. Later, we'll run into Susie hanging outside Noelle's house. She'll tell us that last night she brought the Chapter 4 Darkness to Castletown and found the church's shelter code. It was also on the fire hydrant. She tells us that she'll have to stick with Noelle today, and that she'll hopefully get the rest of the code from the guitar. That's right, my main prediction for Chapter 5 is that Susie will not join us in this dark world. Not to say that she'll have zero role in this chapter. I think it's almost guaranteed that we'll cut to her and Noelle hanging out at the festival throughout the story. Anyways, we explore around town, go to Castletown, have a couple cutscenes, finally be able to climb up the Mr. Society wall, maybe have a couple new challenges at the dojo, and give Sham the next crystal, leaving only one left. When you leave, you'll head back to the Flower King and go solo into your next Dark World. At least it would be solo if it wasn't for Rousey, who also shows up. I picture this Dark World having a big nature and comic book theme. I think that the climbing mechanic will return with us scaling vines and other plants. I picture this chapter starting out in a creepy, mostly dead area taking place in the background before we make it towards a lush garden taking place in the front area. Other areas I can think of will be a small frozen over section based on the fridge, which will have a pickle NPC that's basically just Sans. Asgore calls Sans Pickle Man, he gets pickles from Sans, and Pickle Sans is a dumb enough joke for Deltarune. Another one that I am 100% confident will be here is a wheat field that we will find the egg at. I can imagine a kind of scythe enemy there, and this will likely be the place where we find the master of bread Malleus is searching for. Anyways, we make our way towards a castle where Asgore is staying at this whole time. I have a couple theories for the NPCs in this section. One is a Darkner spawn from the Toriel wedding photo, which will show us how their relationship was before the divorce. A group of NPCs I can imagine us fighting are all these flowers in a sort of boss rush mode. They might even all have their own unique soul modes, but that seems unlikely as the soul modes have been restricted to crystal bosses so far. Then again, Tricky Tony loves his switch-ups. As for how they'll look, they'll either appear like Flowey, Rousey, or Chris and Asriel, as the flowers are things that he's grown and cared for like children. Also, it seems like the bluest flower seems to have some relation to Miss Mizzle. Finally, the last NPC I can think of is a sheriff-type character made from Asgore's old badge when he was the police chief, possibly locked up as he was seemingly forced out of that position after whatever happened to Des. I've heard a lot of theories that Sans could also join us in this Dark World, but personally I don't see it. I would be happy to be proven wrong though, especially if he's the crystal boss that parallels Rousey, trying to get him to grow a spine and show him that there's more to his existence than serving Lightners. Maybe his Dark World form is like Sans Sheriff, and he was the real friend inside me this entire time. Yeah, that's so fucking stupid. When we finally meet Asgore, I believe that he'll think that Chris and Rousey are Darkner versions of Chris and Asriel. I'll also believe that Rousey's arc of feeling worthless will meet its climax here. At this point in the story, Rousey has the worst attack, defense, and base health of any party member, and Susie's heal is far better if you used it enough. I think Asgore will play a part in making Rousey feel better, and this might be a crazy shot, but I think there's a non-zero chance that Rousey starts the Inferno of Jealousy that chars the garden. It's the kind of curveball that Radiation Tony would throw. Anyways, when we try to seal the fountain, we'll fight Asgore, and I really like the idea that Asgore is fighting us due to something feeding him info. My money's on Friend. It's a field of pink and gold. Friend has been built up across chapters 2 and 4, and it feels like the right time to capitalize on the hype, but I could also see Friend having a spotlight in chapter 6. Anyways, after the fight, in one last Hail Mary, Asgore creates a fountain in a fountain, spawning a Titan. Specifically this Titan because it looks a lot like Asgore, and the other Titan seems to resemble the Knight as well. With only 2 party members and no old man, we'll be forced to retreat a bit, seeing the Flower Kingdom burst into flame. During this section is when I predict we'll fight the secret boss, either the imprisoned sheriff or a corrupted version of the wedding phototorial. I feel like they could both use the purple soul mode, either having us weave through bullets in the sheriff fight or flee from growing flames in the Toriel fight. Personally, my money's on the sheriff since Floral, Cowboy, and Puppets have been built up a lot throughout Chapter 3. I also predict that when we beat this crystal boss, we'll get an insane weapon for Rousey. In the past 2 chapters, we've been given really strong weapons for both Susie and Chris, so it makes sense to complete the pattern for the final member of the Lancer fan club. We make our way to find Asgore and recruit him to help us fight the Titan. I don't think he'd be a full-fledged party member, but you could probably use him in Axe, kind of like the old man. During the Titan fight, we learned why Asgore was forced to quit his role as police chief. Right when we're at the very edge of finishing off the Titan, the Knight shows up and spawns a second one, starting the Roaring. Anyways, it just kind of feels right to have the Roaring begin on Festival Day. Anyways, we run off to seal the primary fountain, but it's not enough. The 2 Titans wreak havoc. We learn the shelter code from Asgore and see our first view of the Night in the Light World, the Soulless Husk, a December holiday. I think it's very possible that if we don't recruit every single enemy, Asgore will either die at the end of the Dark World or in the Light World during the start of the Roaring. This has already been established with both Tina and Jackenstein dying if you don't recruit everyone, and Asgore being the one we lose feels fitting considering he dies in literally every single Undertale run besides True Pacifist. Anyways, Asgore is trapped under the rubble and is forced to be left behind as Chris meets up with Susie and Noelle. Susie and Chris chase the knight with Noelle closely behind, but the door slams shut. But Chris and Susie enter the codes and all three nervously get ready to jump into the bunker before the chapter ends. I'm gonna pause here and explain why I think December's Soulless Husk is the knight. 1. The knight has antlers, and the only Lightners known to have antlers so far are the holidays. And since we see Noelle's Dark World design, it's not her. That leaves Carol, Rudy, and December. Carol seems like a really strong candidate at first. Ties to the bunker, uses a katana, has this strange conspiracy board by her bed, doesn't like Susie, and her opening the Dark Fountains to find Des is pretty solid motivation. It all seems to fit, but there are two big problems. 1, she's right-handed, and the knight holds their sword in their left. And 2, she is too damn obvious. Unless it's intentionally meant to be this obvious, I don't see Carol being the knight. I think Rudy's a really strong candidate. Almost all the Carol evidence works for him as well, minus the katana not liking Susie. The corpse imagery works with his illness, there's this tumor thing inside the knight's chest, and the main symptom of Rudy's illness is coughing. He hits his bed with his left hand when he coughs. He's also pretty cocky, which is one of the few traits we have pinned down for the knight. And Rudy being revealed as the knight in the same chapter centered around Chris's father. It could be a cool parallel having both fathers searching for the same thing, December holiday, and putting their families back together. I would not be mad with having Rudy as the knight at all, but December feels like the perfect knight candidate. First up, the Knight's theme uses parts from Burning Desire, an Azrael song, Lost Girl, a Noelle song that's probably about Des, and Find Her, a song played during the Spanton sweepstakes when viewing Des' guitar. This connects both Azrael and Noelle to the Knight, and Des has direct connections to both of them. Judging by Des' mouse placement, she's left-handed, just like the Knight. The Knight uses a bunch of star attacks, and her room has a bunch of star decorations. The light puzzle from Chapter 2 seems to represent every major character in Deltarune. The blue bird is Chris because Birdly calls them a fellow bluebird. The purple house is Susie because of her troubled home life. The green hat represents Rousey and how he wore a hat to hide himself, though it could very well be a wave due to all the connections between darkness and water we've been given recently. Noelle being the fire may seem off at first, but it works as a foil to Carol, who's all about being ice cold. And finally, the orange shoe is Des because she has an absurd amount of orange shoes in her closet. The knight's weapon looks like a bat before it morphs into a sword, which connects back to Des and her chasing Chris around with a wiffle ball bat, which parallels us and Chris chasing the knight now. Chris also has a bunch of parallels to the knight, with both of them using swords, having similar animations, and them probably being the one to push back against Chris if you try to backtrack at the end of Chapter 4. Chris also literally mirrors the strange black monster in the Mantle minigames that's a black deer as a placeholder sprite. It could just generally be the knight, but the fact that it's black when the other three holidays we've seen are white, red, and brown respectively feels suspect. But why Des' Soulless Husk? Why not just Des? Well, if it's just Des, then why is she missing? Also, why would Carol be working with the knight? And who the hell is Unused meant to be, if not the soul of December? Where's Des' soul? I'll try to explain later, but I think whatever is really controlling the knight is the true big bad. You know, like the name implies, the knight is just another piece on the board. Anyways, that's Husk theory. Another tangent I'm gonna go on is Noelle and Susie's mini-adventure throughout the chapter. It starts with us talking to Susie before the Dark World. She's chilling outside Noelle's house. We can interact with her and she'll talk about how she's going to hang out with Noelle during the festival and about how she'll try to sneak back into her house later to find the guitar. We then head off and explore the festival being set up, go through a little bit of the Dark World, and then we have the option to close our eyes and think about what Susie's doing. We watch her surprise Noelle as she leaves her house to go to the festival. Noelle is shocked and scared for Susie at first, but is eventually brought around by Susie, and we fade back into the Dark World. Next time we check in, we see Susie and Noelle doing standard festival stuff, you know, getting foods, playing games, sneaking out of Carol's view, that sort of thing. This section ends with Noelle asking Susie if she want to ride the Ferris wheel. The next one would kind of be a rerun of the Dark World Ferris wheel ride. Maybe they kiss this time, I don't know. Susie offers to walk Noelle back to her house, and this section closes off. The penultimate section has Susie snooping around for the guitar while Noelle does something at her house. Susie finds the code, memorizes it, and goes back to Noelle. They hang out a little bit more before the section ends with Noelle receiving a call from the hospital. The final section has Rudy die. Noelle won't even get to say goodbye, he's just dead. Noelle will cry a little bit before the screen starts to rumble. Chapter 6 starts at the exact end of Chapter 5 with Noelle, Chris, and Susie diving into the bunker. In case you're wondering why I think that we're going to be going into the bunker during Chapter 6, not during the endgame, let me explain a little bit of Gaster bullshit in the number 6. First up, why would we even go to the shelter in Chapter 6? Well, everything relating to Gaster has something to do with the number 6. All his stats are 6s, all the fun events directly relating to Gaster are in the 60s. I know some people like to be a little pedantic and claim that there's nothing directly tying this sprite to Gaster, but use your head, man. This fella only appears on fun value 66. When interacting with him, he makes the same noise as the Gaster follower. He'll appear in merch just long enough for people to notice him before being hidden away. Sure, once is an accident, but twice is fishy, especially when the vinyl cover doesn't even connect him to Gaster at all. And other similar NPC sprites are allowed to stay, like Goner Kid, the Gaster followers, and Redacted, who doesn't even actually appear in the game. And unlike the rest of the NPCs tied to Gaster, he's black and white, compared to the rest being grayscale. And as we're told in the Chapter 3 egg room, copies are monochrome. Technically, black and white is still monochrome, so this could be a copy of Gaster, but at that point, I'm starting to devolve into fanfiction. Anyways, Gaster is connected to 6, the bunker is tied to Gaster. It makes sense to enter the bunker in Chapter 6. Plus, after Chapter 5, Gerson says that the book swallowed up the author himself, which sounds a whole lot like Gaster falling into his own creation. I'm also going to throw in this small thing I noticed about entry 17 that no one else seems to bring up. Despite Gaster being tied to 6s, his entry is number 17 instead of like 6 or 16 or 66 or 666. It's because when looking at entry number 17 literally, it's 1-7, 1 before 7, which is 6. It's a pun. I just thought that was kind of funny. Anyways, Gaster tangents aside, I think that this will be the most horror-esque chapter. Not like jump scares, but more like the true lab in Undertale. I can't think of any areas, because we know so little about this chapter, but I'll throw in a couple general predictions. Friend finally has some relevance if he doesn't take the Flowey role in Chapter 5, but no fight. Not yet, at least. The vessel will return in some form. Goner fights, with the standout being a Goner Undyne. Eram will return as a non-Zelda-esque fight. And I don't think Rousey will appear much, if at all, in this chapter. However, I do think that there will be a section where we'll run across a mysterious elevator or light patch that'll take us back to the castle town. This Rudin will have lost all its color. It'll say something cryptic before disappearing. Then we can head into Sham's shop and give them the last shadow crystal. They'll then make the purified crystal, and I think that it's likely that we'll have to prove ourselves to get it. So Sham's the final secret boss. I think Sham has a lot more going on than people give him credit for. They were given a sketch with wizard energy in the Winter 2024 newsletter. They're tied to Azrael in some way since he has a drawing of him on his computer. They're likely stronger than Jevil since they imprisoned him even while he presumably had a shadow crystal. They can seemingly tell the future, and they break the fourth wall with the name Sham, pronounced Sham. I don't think they're fighting us out of some evil plot. They just want to make sure that we're ready for the finale. And I can do slightly better than telling you why he's the secret boss. I'll predict the weapon that he gives you if you beat him through violence. The Seam Ripper. It's a weapon that we never see in the game that's referenced in the Undertale cross-stitch book. Anyways, you get the crystal and continue your way through the shelter. You make your way to the fountain and you see a man staring into it as he speaks in a familiar monologue.
Entry number 17. Dark, darker, yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think?
I'm gonna say that his sprite is going to be in a different style to the rest of the cast to show how otherworldly Gaster is. Think like rotoscope or stop motion. It's been done before with Tenna, so it's not completely out of the picture. In terms of who he's speaking to, if we sneak in, it's probably someone like Carol in the Night. If not, I can see Chris being split off from Noelle and Susie, and the two he's referring to being Chris and us, the Soul. I also predict that Sans is here, not like in the room with us, but like somewhere throughout the chapter. I know it's kind of cliche, but he has obvious ties to Gaster in Undertale. Sans Undertale and Sans Deltarune are pretty obviously the same person at this point, and he's the only monster that can seemingly use actual magic with him straight up teleporting. And no, Undyne's freakish strength doesn't count, she's just kind of built different. Look, there's something going on with Sans in this game. Also, this random-ass bird NPC, there's definitely something going on with him. After Gaster yaps a little, Susie learns about the Soul and Chris being two separate entities, and Chris working with the Knight. This is where we get the obligatory Susie fight, while Gaster curiously watches from the background. I don't think this will be a fight that you can speed up or beat through attacking. I doubt that Chris will let us hurt Susie, and even if he could, she has both her own and Noelle's healing to keep her up. This fight is going to be one of endurance, but it will eventually end. If I had to guess, it would probably be the knight attempting to go for a fatal attack before Chris pushes her out of the way, causing Chris to lose their hand. Chris is at a weird amount of not having their hand imagery, and them losing it to protect their best friend in an homage to the first thing they do without a control in chapter 1 feels really fitting. Anyways, the Susie fight is over. The group focuses on the knight, where either through Gaster, Carol, or even the knight itself, we learn how Des became soulless. Let me introduce to you the Des Fountain. Yeah, it's a stupid name. Cut me some slack. One night when Des, Azriel, and Chris snuck out to explore the woods, they found the shelter. And after finding their parents in the church's code, they set up a time where they can sneak in and learn its secrets. However, Chris gets cold feet and stays back, begging Azriel and Des not to go in. And while Azriel wants to make sure that Chris is okay, Des has come too far to turn back now. She rushes into the shelter needing to know more. As she bolts in, the doors mysteriously slam behind her. Azriel and Chris panic and call Asgore. He rushes down, but it's too late. They open the door to find Des fallen down. In an attempt to escape, she went to steal the fountain. But as we know from Undertale, monster souls cannot persist outside of the body for long, so it's shattered throughout the dark world, crystallizing into shadow. Anyways, that's my theory, but a theory without evidence is just a guess. So let's get to some evidence. First off, look at this weird phrase, tale where lost the forest followed, the pointed grow. The where children, the poor children. Scrambled gibberish, but if you rearrange it, you get lost where the forest would grow, the children followed the pointed tail, the poor children. Let's look at that line by line. Lost where the forest would grow immediately brings the shelter to mind, as it's deep within the hometown forest. The children followed the pointed tail. This one's a bit more vague, but Friend seems to be tied to the shelter. Friend has a cat-like appearance. In the Spanted sweepstakes, it says that cats and cat petters are made of circles, and the Tale of Hell is made entirely out of circles and one pointed triangle, so maybe Friend is what compelled Des to go back into the shelter. And finally, the poor children is in reference to Des, Chris, and Azriel. Des lost her soul. Chris was left scarred, and this might be the reason they made the promise to the mysterious voice. And Azriel is harder to pinpoint since he hasn't shown up yet, but he was very obviously close to Des, so he's definitely hurt by her going missing. Also notice how Raise Up Your Bat seems to be written by Des and shares lyrics with Don't Forget, implying that they're made by the same person. And even if they're not, the lyrics of Raise Up Your Bat include Come Follow Me Into the Dark and I'm With You in the Dark. Des is telling Chris to follow her into the dark, to follow her into the bunker. Maybe it's not exactly this. In fact, it's probably not exactly this. But the main point, I'm guessing, is that the knight is Des's body, not her soul. After the knight's backstory is explained, we get a second round of the knight fight. It'll probably just be a beefed up version of the chapter 3 fight, but I think that there will be a way to spare the knight. Something involving the purified crystal and Noelle. However, it'd probably be more than just the purified crystal itself. Maybe you'd also have to recruit all the enemies, give Tenet a Metaton, get all the eggs, you know, something like that. Anyways, after beating the knight through violence, we're led to our first ending. I know the website only says one ending, but it has a question mark, and I think I might get it. Only one of the Deltarune endings is going to be an actual ending, but to explain what I mean by that, I kinda gotta delve into each ending. So let's start with the first one, which I'm gonna dub The World Revolving. I think that if you don't reach certain requirements, you'll be stuck in the first ending. You know, stuff like the purified crystal, the recruits, the eggs, and all that. But this ending would be kind of a time loop. That's why when we first enter the Dark World in Chapter 4, Chris already has a save file, and it also kind of ties back to the first crystal boss. Despite going through all this, the entire adventure, the world just kept spinning, and we're right back where we started. I don't think you'll have to replay every single chapter, but just the ones that you missed something in. Hell, you might even get some kind of New Game Plus dialogue. This would probably be the lightest ending since it's not really an ending. It's kind of like Neutral Pacifist in Undertale. It's still an ending, it's just not as beefy as the rest. Speaking of the rest, let's take a look back into Chapter 5 and the Weird Route. First, let's discuss this cryptic image released as a part of the sweepstakes. This image shows a 2, 4, and 5 with a hidden 1 and 3. Since the 2 plays the Snowgrave sound, it seems pretty clear that this is Weird Route related. I'm thinking that they're telling us what we have to do to continue the Weird Route. Chapter 1 is invisible because there's nothing directly affecting the Weird Route in Chapter 1, but there's still something you have to do in that chapter. Personally, I think it's just getting the Shadow Crystal, and the reason it's so small is because you technically don't even have to do that quest or even play the chapter in the same file to experience the Weird Route. As long as you've done it before in that slot, the Shadow Crystal will show up in your castle town. Chapter 2 is the largest because you have to go the most out of your way to do the Weird Route. with it being intentionally convoluted. Chapter 3 is also big because doing the sword route parallels the start of the weird route and is also extremely strange and convoluted, but it's invisible because there's nothing directly weird route required in this chapter besides the shadow crystal. Chapter 4 is shown because there is something that you have to do to directly progress the weird route with this section in Noelle's house, but it's small because it's pretty straightforward and you could probably achieve it on your first playthrough. So I'm going to predict that while Chapter 5's weird route shenanigans will be less straightforward than 4's, it'll be way more obvious than Chapter 2's. Anyways, let's get into the actual changes with the chapter. First off, with Noelle going to the festival with us instead of Susie, she'll join us for this dark world. This will leave Susie to break into the holiday manor all by herself. Anyways, I see the weird route version of this chapter starting with Noelle and us meeting up with Rouse. The first part of the chapter would pretty much just go the same. You'll just have to go out of your way to freeze every enemy in all the areas. Not too complicated, but still a little bit out of the way. Rouse might talk about how this seems off or wrong, but we'll ignore him. When you reach the castle, you'll go a little out of your way to find the crystal boss early, fight a much shorter fight, or no fight at all, and get the shadow crystal. Think of it like Mettaton Neo. You're not rewarded with a cool fight for doing this. Not yet, at least. You'll get the crystal and make your way to Asgore. This is your last chance to really end the weird route. But you've come this far already. You're not going to end this route for something as small as fatherly love. You snowgrave Asgore and stop the roaring from ever happening. But despite all that, you haven't defied fate, because of this one little prophecy. If fountains freed, the roaring cries, and tighten shape from darkened eyes. Keyword, if. This is the only if in the entire prophecy, it's not a requirement. Anyways, you then seal the fountain, and in the light world, you explore the shop and find Asgore's old badge, getting his shelter code. After we've done that, the red pixel inside Noelle has fully grown into a soul. It's not a literal fully grown soul, but something that represents our full control over Noelle. You leave to find Susie, and notice that she broke into Noelle's house and found the guitar. We might have seen this go down in place of the Noelle and Susie shenanigans. They now have all the codes. They're good to go into the shelter. Susie tells Chris that they'll have to get to the shelter as quickly as possible, but they can't bring Noelle, it's too dangerous or something. However, you're now given a dialogue box with 2 of the exact same choices, which is Noelle is coming. Susie awkwardly stares and asks if we rehearsed that or something. We now have full control over Noelle. The chapter then ends and we get a message from Gaster saying the choices we made so far have been very interesting. I'm gonna pause before Weird Route Chapter 6 to explain what I believe Gaster's motivation is. Most of this is total speculation, by the way. Anyways, let's start with some Gaster backstory so we have some basic groundwork. In Undertale, he has no direct mention in the game, outside of fun events and data mining, with the sole exception of maybe 1 or 2 river person dialogues, those being tra-la-la, beware the man who speaks in hands, and tra-la-la, beware the man who came from another world. However, both of these could be referring to someone else, with the hands thing possibly being us because we interact with this world through a controller or keyboard, which we use our hands, or Toby Fox, who created this world with his hands. The man from another world could refer to Gaster, but it could also be us/Toby, who came from the real world, but by that logic it also includes So Sorry, or Sans, who almost certainly seems to have come from Deltarune at this point. Personally, I believe Gaster is the man who speaks in hands, because the only time we see him speak in Undertale, it uses wingdings, which commonly uses hands as symbols, but the man from another world is likely Sans. Anyways, during a couple fun events, you meet 3 great characters that are all called Gaster followers in the code. They each give us a little bit of info about Gaster, however the big things that they tell us are that he was the former royal scientist before Alphys. One day his experiments went wrong, he fell into his creation, his life was cut short, he disappeared without a trace, he was possibly shattered across time and space, Asgore took a while to replace him, and he is apparently always listening. He also has some relation to Sans, because he uses these things named Gaster blasters. Those could also tie him to Papyrus, as he says, "Nyeh, how lucky of you. If I had only used my special attack, you surely would have been blasted to..." in an aborted genocide run. However, he could have just received them from Sans. Then again, maybe Papyrus got them from Gaster directly, and Sans took them from his box of bones during the genocide route. That's unlikely, as Sans has a lot more connections to the lab and Alphys, but it's a fun thought. These blasters have design similarities with the Determination extractor, which could imply that he made it, but I find it unlikely. Determination revolves around Alphys' character, and claiming that Gaster was actually behind it all really takes away from her. There are 2 other Goner characters that don't directly mention Gaster, but I still feel like should be mentioned regardless. clam girl who talks about a neighbor named Susie. If you talk to her, then head to Sans' workshop, the dialogue will change when looking in the first drawer. It'll say that there is a poorly drawn picture of 3 smiling people with the phrase, "Don't forget." And exclusively on the Switch and Xbox ports, the clam girl will say, "The time for meeting Susie is fast approaching." Then she turns grayscale and plays the Mystery Man / Gaster Follower 2 sound effect. This all ties back to Deltarune, the mention of Susie, even if it's spelled different, and the drawing of 3 smiling people. It all just screams Deltarune. This then associates Gaster to Deltarune, and that brings everything full circle. Everything but the last Goner NPC. The Goner Kid is really weird. When Undertale first released, it was unclear if they were even related to Gaster since they don't mention him at all. Of course, we now know that Goners have definite ties to Gaster, but their dialogue is still strange. Have you ever thought about a world where everything is the same, except you don't exist? Everything functions perfectly without you. Thought terrifies me. If you come back with an umbrella, they say, "An umbrella? But it's not raining." You know, that does make me feel a little better about this. Thank you. Please forget about me. They'll stick around for a minute, but the second you leave that room, your fun value resets and they're gone. In the early days of the fandom, people thought this was a reference to the fact that Goner Kid doesn't show up in every run, with them only showing up if your fun value is 90 or greater. However, as the theory that all the fun events are tied to Gaster in some way grew in popularity, people have searched for a way to connect the Goner Kid back to him. Of course, they're grayscale, which is a trait only shared with the Gaster followers. However, their dialogue seemed to have nothing to do with Gaster. This led to the theory that their dialogue is referencing what happened to Gaster in the main game, with him being forgotten due to never even being mentioned without fun events. But personally, I never vibed with that theory. The Gaster Blasters still exist with Sans and presumably Papyrus. Even if you don't fight them, the River Person can still warn you, and Asgore still took a long time to replace him. Personally, my theory is that this is actually referencing Gaster's role to Deltarune's world. A Gaster never originally existed in Deltarune's world, but when he was shattered across time and space, he found a world where, among other things, he never existed. This kind of goes against the whole where everything is the same bit, but Deltarune isn't done yet. You can't prove me wrong. Yet. Now, I want to use this to transition into my theoretical Gaster timeline. Dr. Wingding's Gaster was appointed to the position of royal scientist sometime before Kara and Asriel died. When the monsters left the ruins, Gaster constructed the core, a machine that converts geothermal energy into magical electricity. I want to make it clear, the core does not supply magic itself, that's just something that monsters can do. The core supplies magical energy, basically it's a massive steam engine. Anyways, Kara becomes ill with the Buttercups, and during this, Gaster is assigned to a new project. Find some way to keep Kara alive. This leads to Gaster discovering the Dark Worlds. Before he can show his findings, Kara dies, Asriel absorbs their soul, and also dies. The kingdom is sent into mourning. Gaster brings Kara's body and some of Asriel's dust into the Dark World, but it doesn't work. As we learned in Deltarune Chapter 4, Darkners made in a Lightner's image are limited to very specific darkness, and Gaster was not close enough with the royal family to resurrect them. He did find a way to make copies of people, but they were off. Grayscale, not totally the same. Despite this, Gaster continued his research. He had already found something darker than dark, but he wanted more. He wanted the root of darkness, the depths. Eventually, he found it, but he went too deep. He fell into his creation and disappeared without a trace, shattered across time and space. Parts of him remained, but for all intents and purposes, he was gone. But he wasn't totally dead. But I shouldn't say more. After all, it's rude to talk of people who are listening. So I'm going to go over what I believe will be the most contentious part of that. The whole Gaster was assigned to find a way to keep Kara alive, and that's how he discovered the Dark Worlds. While this is kind of out there, I think that is what Chapter 4 of Deltarune is hinting at. Like, it's telling us that Dark Worlds can revive the dead, and it feels weird to only have that be brought up as like a little one-time thing. I think it's likely that this is a kind of foreshadowing, so it doesn't feel as out there when it's brought back up again. And I don't mean this as in everything will tie back to Undertale, it's all one big story. It's been made clear that that's not the case. But I do think that there will be a couple things that will tie back to make more sense. Another thing that is kind of suspect to me is all the weird similarities between Gerson and Gaster. They both start with G's, they both fell into their own creation, they both write versions of the prophecy. Gerson is an anagram for Goners. Gerson replaces Gaster in the tarot cards. It's not a lot, but it's weird that it happens this often. So maybe the fact that it's Gerson who shows up is trying to point us towards the whole reviving the dead thing to be more important. Feel free to make fun of me when I'm proven wrong though. Alright, with all that backstory and theorizing stated, let me get into my actual idea for Gaster's motivation. I think he's just kind of curious about the prophecy. He's running experiments to test what happens when certain variables are changed in the prophecy. Look at the vagueness in these prophecy panels, especially the ones regarding the heroes. The cage made of human soul and parts. Yeah, Chris fits that description, but so does our vessel, arguably more so. The prince alone in deepest dark. Rousey fits into that perfectly, but you could squeeze someone like Lancer into that role if you really wanted to. And finally, the girl. This one is the most clear in my opinion. You could have it interpreted as Noelle as the girl, with the love she gains either being her affection for Susie or maybe level of violence. It could also be Susie since she has her hope described multiple times throughout the narrative. And this prophecy is called Rude Buster in the files. The love that she gains could very well be with Noelle. Or, very, very interestingly, it could be both of them. And that's why a Deltarune with 4 triangles appears during the sword route. Hell, we can even see actual evidence of this with Tina and Queen's prophecies. The Lord of Screens being cleaved red by blade can either be fatal or not, depending on if you recruited everyone. And the Queen's chariot can either not be stopped because all of Cyberworld is frozen, or only in this short section. I've heard the latter being used as evidence that the weird route is the real version of the prophecy, but I think it isn't so cut and dry. Like Gerson said, stories can be rewritten, and our story is one of those rewrites. So that's what my idea for Gaster's plan. But what's the why? I'll be frank, I'm kinda stumped. We have basically 0 traits to work with for Gaster. Maybe he wants to be unshattered from time and space. Maybe he wants to find a way to stop the Angel's Heaven, and that's why he has all the 6 imagery. Maybe he's just bored in the depths, and this is some kind of entertainment in the endless dark. I couldn't tell you, but what do you, the viewers, think? Anyways, I want to go over one more thing before we get back into the weird route. So we know in Deltarune, when there's any light, you're in the light world. When there's no light, you're in darkness. And when it's darker than dark, you're in the dark world. That's our 3 general layers. But we know there's stuff outside of this. There are the Titans, which are beings of pure darkness with no thoughts or goals, just unfeeling darkness. But you know, they're still limited to the dark world. But then there's us. We're canon to Deltarune in the form of the soul, so we come from a lighter than light world. And if something can be lighter than a light world, then who's to say that there isn't something that could be darker than a dark world? And that's where I believe Gaster is. And I think we've partially seen it before. It's the depths. It's the place where we make our vessel, the game over screen, the narration that we see during the start of the game and the night fight and the end of chapter 4. And it's the code of the game itself where we find unused. Hell, it might even be stuff like the sound test or Mystery Man room in Undertale. That's kind of what I think the shelter is connected to, because it being just another plain old dark world seems a little tame for such a hyped up area. I don't know, maybe I'm kind of spoiled. Anyways, back to the weird route. The 3 heroes dive into the bunker. The march through the shelter will still have a lot of the same beats. At this point, you should know the drill. Freeze everything. Susie might feel a little bit odd, but I doubt it'll go any further, since I imagine most of the Darkners here would be less than conscious. We get split up with us and Noelle going without Susie. We return to Castletown to receive the Purified Crystal. Where the original fight was a good-hearted standard battle, this one would be a dark battle with limited TP gain, making getting enough TP for Snowgrave take forever. And it'll be tough as hell. This guy was beating pre-nerfed Jevil with no shadow crystals. Imagine what he could do with 5. Regardless, you'll eventually win and receive the Purified Crystal. You head over to the bakery and forge the Twisted Sword. I don't see any way the Thorn Ring leaves Noelle at this point, so I imagine it being physically forged around her, making it impossible to unequip. I know that it's only equipable by Chris in the files right now, but if I had this super secret weird route weapon that I wanted to hide the true purpose of, then I'd probably make it impossible to equip on the character that it'd be for. Plus, Noelle using swords isn't totally out of nowhere, because she can currently equip both the Black Shard and Jingle Blade in the files. I imagine the current version in the files only being available during a boarded weird route. Anyways, you leave Castletown and head deeper into the shelter. The E-Ram fight would stay the same, but the dialogue would change a lot, praising Chris for their newfound leadership and puppet. They'd say something about their burning red eyes, and this is probably where we'd get confirmation that they're the pizza box from the Spanton sweepstakes. I can also see a friend mini-boss with the return of the karma mechanic, especially since the friend jump scare in the sweepstakes uses the exact same yellow and purple. A couple battles attacking with the Twisted Sword, and we notice Noelle's maximum health is slowly dropping while her attack greatly increases. We eventually find our discarded vessel and somehow take control of it, attempting to leave with Noelle. Noelle seems conflicted at first, but our hold over her is too strong at this point. Chris passes out from exhaustion or something. I don't know. We walk around killing basically any character left pretty quickly. Bird guy goes down no problem, Carol can't get through to Noelle, and we catch the knight off guard. We start to realize that our own vessel is much weaker than Chris and their 5.5 chapters of experience. Combine that with all of our fuck all armor and weapons, and we're pretty much solely relying on Noelle for anything. We eventually come to Winggaster himself, and he is very, very interested by these developments. Before we can enter a battle with Gaster though, we're hit in the back by a blast. We get our big Susie fight. Our physical attacks will do basically nothing that she can't heal off, so we're forced to use Snowgrave. And don't think you could just cheese it with tension items, those all got left behind when you abandoned Chris. You are at ground zero. She'll talk about how she found out what we did to Chris, what we've been doing throughout the chapters, and maybe she'll make a comment about us only being able to talk through others and how that pisses her off, stuff like that. The attacks are basically the same as the normal route, minus it being us and Noelle instead of just Chris. She'll focus on the vessel rather than Noelle, which would help us since we kinda need her to do anything at this point. Eventually, we get enough to cast Snowgrave and everything stands still for a little while. Noelle is tired and weak, the vessel is badly damaged, and Susie is frozen in place. Everything is quiet. Until something breaks through the ice. It's not Chris coming back, it's not Gaster lending a hand, and it's not Noelle turning on us. It's Susie. It's the girl with hope crossed on her heart. This is Deltarune's Undying the Undying. I'm talking pure hype moment and aura right here. Her theme for the second phase is like a cross between Rude Buster, Battle Against a True Hero, and Megalovania. And fuck it, give her the freedom motif. If there's any character who consistently defies fate in this story, it's Susie the surviving over here. I'm not too sure what to call it, but something like the girl with hope crossed on her heart would be absolute cinema. This should be the hardest battle in both games. The vessel and its fuck all damage would have to defend pretty much every turn. Maybe there's a talk act, but I see it pissing off Susie even more. You could try to Snowgrave again, but Susie knows your tricks by now, but if she sees that again, she's just Rude Bustering Noelle straight out of the sky, losing all your TP and knocking Noelle out instantly. You're pretty much forced to Ice Shock or attack with the Twisted Sword every turn if you want to outpace Susie's healing. This fight should be painfully unfair and long. The goal should be to make your rage quit, but you have to see everything. You somehow persist and hit Susie with one last Ice Shock, killing the last bit of hope in this world. The battle ends, but the Twisted Sword has drained everything from Noelle, and she was used up. You pick up this Twisted Sword from Noelle's dust and march towards the source of the darkness. You make your way in an attempt to seal it off when something familiar happens. In an homage to everyone's favorite salesman, Circa 1997, Chris dives from the top of the screen and we engage in one last battle. Where Susie's fight was one last ray of hope for the world, Chris is more of a desperate animal clawing at us to survive. Not to say Chris is weak, but there's certainly no Susie. This is one last desperate fight to stop you from sealing the root of darkness and permanently killing the balance of light and dark. They may be physically stronger, they may have better gear, and they may have several reasons to want us dead, but we have something they don't. The ability to try again. Chris's fight could be made easier or harder, depending on what you equipped on them earlier. If you give them the best possible loadout, they'll have better attack and defense, and it could be cool if they had unique attacks depending on what weapons you had equipped, but eventually you'll wear them down regardless. And Chris was used up. You sealed the well, and without any dark to balance it out, light consumes the world, bringing about the angel's heaven. Before the world is completely consumed, whether it's his own will or someone else's, a certain skeleton grabs a bunch of equipment and goes into a strange machine, now trapped in a world that's not his own, all alone. All he has are some strange blueprints and handwriting he can't understand, a machine he doesn't know how to fix, a photo album with pictures of his old life, the police chief's badge, and a small drawing made by a frozen girl of her and her two friends, with "Don't Forget" written underneath. So I'm gonna quickly go over a couple things that I think you guys might question about this. First up, where the hell is Rouse? I'll be honest, I couldn't think of what to do with him. I don't think there's any world where Rouse would fight you. Freezing Darkners, he won't care. Snowgraving Asgore, maybe. Attacking Susie, 100%. But having him fight along Susie would kind of take away from her. If I had to throw in a Rouse fight somewhere, it'd probably be as the final boss of Chapter 5, replacing Asgore, though him getting frozen would also work. Next up, Sans being from Deltarune, but not Papyrus. I know people are pretty split on this theory. Sans being from Deltarune is pretty much accepted. The place where it rained, I know the feeling, knowing what the sun is, all that type of stuff. Papyrus, on the other hand, is a lot more contested. On one hand, he's Sans' brother. There's piss and shit theory, and he claims to come from a place with green grass. On the other hand, he doesn't know what the sun is. A majority of the evidence for him being from Deltarune is just that Sans is from Deltarune, and he mentions nothing of his old home in the Lost Soul section. While it's funny to imagine Papyrus mogging the absolute god of hyperdeath, it feels weak. And Sans losing everything, including his brother, makes his story much more tragic, and his closure in the end of True Pacifist so much more satisfying. And finally, no Gaster fight. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think we're getting one. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that he won't be plot relevant, far from it, but not every character needs a fight. And I don't think that there's anything that we could do to make Gaster throw hands. He'd probably just hit us with some very interesting type shit. I would love to be proven wrong though. If we were to get a Gaster fight, I doubt it'd be like any regular fight from either Deltarune or Undertale. Maybe like a weird combination where we swap through different styles. We start off in like Deltarune, then we transition to something like the Dark World non-battle fights. Then maybe we switch to an Undertale style fight and finish off with something like Omega Flowey. That could be really cool. Anyways, back to the main route. Let's say you managed to recruit every enemy, gave Tenna a Metaton, found all the Shadow Crystals, and got every egg. Well, instead of Chapter 6 ending with us beating the knight through violence and going into a time loop, you can spare the knight and save Des. After that, Rousey busts in with pretty much every Darkner we recruited, spare like King, Tenna, and a couple others. They immediately rush Gaster and trap him, kind of like what happened to King in Chapter 1. The Fun Gang reunites and Rousey apologizes for not being there sooner. Then, the chapter closes out. Chapter 7 opens out with Rousey laying out what's going on outside the shelter. All the roaring stuff, Lightners in shambles, Darkners turned into stone, and the Titans wreaking havoc. The remaining Darkners are being kept from petrifying due to still having a purpose. That is being recruited into the Fun Gang army against the Titans. Of course, it's not a permanent solution, as some Darkners are already slowly petrifying. My bet on the first to go is either Trashy or the Pippins. Anyways, Lancer jumps out of Chris's pocket as the Fun Gang devise a plan. Plus Des devise a plan. Leave the shelter, rescue the residents of Hometown, and seal the Titans. After this, we can choose to interact with some of the faces we've met across our journey, and talk to Gaster inside of his cage. He'll tell us that this is something wholly unexpected, before disappearing in front of us. Susie asks what the hell is up with that guy, before Chris, single-handedly, leads the pack through the shelter. As we make our way through the shelter, we find Sans, and he is the first to join our party. To avoid crowding, the party joining mechanic isn't them following us around like Birdly and the original Starwalker in that one room of Chapter 2, but rather them just showing up in rooms as we make our way throughout the world. We'll make our way through the shelter, rescue Undyne, but in her disoriented state, she assumes we're working with the Knight, giving us a fun mini-boss where we have to talk her down. It'll be a lot like the Goner Undyne fight, except the real deal is a lot stronger. She eventually calms down and joins our party in a weakened state. Eventually, the group comes across Carol, and she reunites with Noelle and Des. With all her Christmas theming, this is probably the moment that her cold heart grows 3 sizes. The sweet reunion ends with Carol joining us and us leaving the shelter through a grand door. The party leaves the shelter and sees Titans walking around, and attempts to run after them, but the main path to Hometown has been blocked by fallen trees, so our group cuts through the forest towards the festival. We can't see our party through the canopy, but as we're walking around, we notice a pointed tail slithering around our group, following us. Watching. Fortunately for us, we don't encounter it. However, when we talk to one of our recruited Darkners, they take note of how our group seems smaller than when we first started going through the forest. We walk through the ruins of the festival and eventually meet a crossroads where Susie says we should split up to cover more ground and find more endangered people. If you head one way, Undyne and Sans will follow Chris and Rousey, while Susie, Noelle, Des, and Carol go the other. The other way has Chris, Rousey, Susie, Noelle, and Des go together, while Undyne, Sans, and Carol split off. Why do the adults sometimes leave the fun game behind? Why are the groups different? Well, at this point, it's less guessing about the chapters and more just me writing fan fiction. Anyways, the path you choose will decide who you find and recruit. If it's the Kruz, you find people like QC, Alphys, Asgore, and Toriel. If you go with the Fun Gang plus Des, you run across Jockington, Caddy, Bratty, and Birdly. In terms of designs, Alphys will look like a Mew Mew or General Magical Girl type character, Caddy could look like a Raven type sorceress, and Jockington will have the beard. For the rest, I don't know. Come up with your own designs below. Both sections end with a mini-boss before you and the other group meet back up and face some more fully formed Titan spawn. Your group manages to take out one, but then gets cornered by 2 more before they get taken out by a slash and a laser. The camera pans up to reveal Papyrus and Azrael. Time for a little mini tangent on why I think Papyrus and Azrael will be revealed together. 1, they are both the most anticipated Undertale characters to be revealed in Deltarune. 2, Papyrus is the only character to have any significant relation to Azrael / Flowey, besides the people that literally made him and Kara. 3, Sans says that we might meet Papyrus when our brother comes back. 4, Papyrus is older than Monster Kid in Undertale, so it makes sense that he'd be older than Monster Teen in Deltarune, meaning that he could be around college age. And 5, hype moments in Aura, people. I'm betting Azrael will have a mage type appearance, kind of like his god of hyper-death form, and I hope that Papyrus has an almost Grim Reaper type appearance, mostly because the idea of him having a scythe is absolute cinema. Chris gets their reunion with Azrael, and we get our reunion with the GOAT. Eventually, we make our way towards the main part of Hometown and watch the 2 Titans destroy the school, and the grand fountain flows into the sky. Afterwards, we take a moment to gather gather our bearings and notice pretty much all of our Darkner recruits are gone. We got like Lancer, Queen, the Weather Trio, some people from Chapter 5, and that is pretty much it. If you backtrack, you don't even find statues. It's like they just disappeared without a trace. We travel through the ruins of Hometown and make our way to the first of the 2 Titans. And like last time, it heals itself with a cocoon. However, this time, we don't need the old man. Susie's Buster shatters it on its own. We seal the first Titan and are greeted by a familiar laugh. Yeah, guess you didn't need me to bring the boom this time. Or something like that, while he, Alvin, and Mrs. Boom join the party. You can stop to talk to them and see Alvin grow more confident with closure. You continue throughout, find Tina, Metaton, and the rest of the books. Please, I desperately need a Dark World Metaton. That is my goat. We continue recruiting the rest of Hometown and eventually find our way to the hospital. We try to pass, but Noelle has an idea. If Gerson could come back, who's to say Rudy's not somewhere in there? Noelle creeps inside, quietly making her way to his room. She gently opens the door and peeks inside to find nothing. Asgore and Des try to comfort her while Carol hangs back, unable to get the words right. We continue our way towards the Grand Fountain, and right before we make it, a shadow bursts out of the ground. Standing in our way is King. Partially engulfed in darkness, he towers over us. The only parts of his face that we can see is a twisted smile and a piercing set of pink and gold eyes. Despite losing the Shadow Mantle and being in prison for a week, he's much stronger than the first time around. Eventually, with the help of Lancer and Queen, we break through to him. He starts to leave the shadows, smile fading, and eyes returning back to normal. He walks towards us before, in a flash, he's pierced by a pointed tail and ripped back into the shadows. For a brief moment, we realize that every single Darkner besides Rousey, Gerson, Tina, Queen, and Lancer are gone. Even the original Starwalker. We realize that whatever that thing is has been taking them. Lancer quickly dashes into the darkness to find his dad. We follow behind him up a tower towards the final Titan. We find Lancer and comfort him, Susie telling him that we'll find his dad. We rush towards the final Titan, and the fight starts off similarly. But when it's time for Susie to shatter its guard with the Rude Buster, it's not enough. Gerson joins in, but it's still standing. So one by one, everyone sends out their support. Alvin, Caddy, Toriel, Noelle, and Rousey send out different kinds of elemental magic. Asgore throws his trident. Des, Azrael, and Sans throw out various blasts. Queen, Tina, and Lancer throw various projectiles. Papyrus and Jockington use melee attacks. And it ends with Chris sending one final blow, revealing something horrible. Instead of the emotionalist Titan, it's a weird cat thing with a twisted grin and pink and gold eyes. Susie has one moment to gasp before an entire party besides Chris, Susie, Rousey, and Noelle are grabbed by the creature's horrid limbs. Darkners are absorbed, and the Lighteners are pulled into the thing's inky abyss of a body. The perspective shifts, and we're staring straight at the creature, the Grand Fountain being the only source of light behind the towering beast. I think this fight will be a sort of best of for Deltarune, with Friend acting like a kind of Bakaneko, puppeteering the husks of Darkners and the still living Hometown residents we've met across the game. It starts off with just Friend before he starts to attack each of the party members personally. He starts off with Susie puppeteering Lancer and Gerson, all the while asking Susie if she's sure she's even the girl in the prophecy, pointing out how Noelle fits it much better than her. Maybe Lancer or Gerson start to get some words out before Friend drags them back in. We get a little explanation about its origins, either a demon Chris and Caddy summoned, or something from Noelle's Cat Petter's game. If it's something Chris and Caddy summon, he pulls out Caddy from the abyss briefly, a fake smile plastered across her face to keep her from talking, forcing her to attack us with her dark magic. We get a couple other encounters: Tina, Asgore, Birdly, Toriel, and Carol. Anytime we try to attack, our party won't let us, and if Friend has no one out, it just misses. Our only option is to attempt to banish it, but one or two won't do. We just have to keep going. Once we reach the halfway point, Friend curiously stares at us before realizing something. He missed 2 Darkners, besides Rousey. The Dealmaker / Puppet Scarf and the Devil's Tail / Devil's Knife are removed from your inventory. It then slightly asks if you were using those. If they were equipped, tough luck. You're either missing an armor or being forced to use your default weapons. You then rematch Spamton and Jevil. Spamton is forced into new strings, and Jevil can't do anything. We get a little bit more info about why they went insane, and the reveal that Friend is Mike. After that, you move on to a duo fight against Des and Azrael. Friend plays around with them a little bit like dolls and makes fun of Des for being easy to lure into the shelter. And the final fight is against a Darkner Rudy. Everyone but Rousey is instantly shocked because he has no clue who that is. After he gets consumed back into Friend, it cackles to itself for a minute before one of its limbs slams down onto the Fun Gang. For a moment, they are completely consumed by the darkness. Then, the soul lights up, and we're brought into phase 2 of the fight. Though it's more like a new area entirely, think kinda like the Master Core Fortress from Smash 4, or the Flowey fight from Undertale Yellow. You start to fight twisted versions of various mini-bosses, like Clover, El Nina and La Nina, Sweet Cap and Cakes, basically any somewhat major fight not referenced in the earlier section. However, at one point, there's a small moment of quiet between Noelle and Rudy. He's still trapped, but he can talk to her one last time. He tells her that he's proud of her, that she's stronger than she thinks she is. He tells her to tell Carol and Noelle that he loves them after she kicks this thing's ass. Noelle is filled with determination. You make it to the fountain inside of the Titan and to the last bit of the friend fight. Just a darkness fight. No rematches, just you four versus friend. Eventually, you wear it down and seal the Titan. At first, everything seems okay. Hometown is still in ruins and no one's here, but the sky is normal and friend is gone. But Susie realizes something. How's Rouse here? He turns around and falls to the ground, glasses falling off, revealing a pair of pink and gold eyes. He screams to seal the fountain before a smile overtakes him. But the smile isn't the same as before. It looks nervous, scared, like it's trying to claw itself away from Rousey. You realize that it's not taking over Rousey. Rousey is holding that thing hostage in the dark world for you to seal it inside. You try to search for any other way, but he's made up his mind. His fate was sealed the moment the prophecy was written. With a heavy heart, you seal the grand fountain, and it closes. Instead of turning into a light world object, both Rousey and friend petrify together, forever locked in their final struggle. The world is saved, but at the cost of a friend. You can walk around hometown for a bit and talk to everyone you saved, but the last thing that you can do is walk up to Susie, grieving by the statue, and hand her a lone jack of spades. She sits up, tears in her eyes, and smiles. The darkness may be gone, but the memories that they gained, the friendships, they're still real, and they're still there. The credits roll, and at the end, you watch as Chris and Susie sit by the statue and talk to it. But it's not a conversation we're a part of, so we're sent back into the depths one more time, and Gaster asks us one final question. Do we wish to let go of this world, or do we want to try our hands at a different fate? If we let go, their world just keeps spinning. If we try our hands at a different fate, we receive the same outcome. That's the one ending. The only ending where we don't get a chance to come back. Oh, and in case you're wondering why this doesn't bring about the Angel's Heaven, like in the Weird Route, this is just us sealing off the main dark fountain instead of sealing out the root of darkness itself. You could still, make a dark fountain, but if you did, you'd probably be releasing Friend again. I know it's convoluted, but I felt like it was a half-decent ending. One final message from me after editing. I think I might have messed up a little with the ending. I set it to a single prophesized fate when the whole game seems to be going against that, and that is my bad. I think that while the writing is still solid, the content of this ending is almost 100% wrong, and that there will be a way to change the fate. However, it's probably not from us, the player, but rather from Susie. Anyways, post-audio Banana Bread Man out. Anyways, now I just gotta close up some loose ends. The identity of the Forgotten Man, the chapter names, and the release dates. Alright, here's my 5 most likely candidates for the Forgotten Man. Number 5, Papyrus. This one's kind of been flown around for a bit. It feels a bit more likely than pretty much every Undertale character we haven't seen in Deltarune yet, with 2 exceptions. Number 4, the River Person. This is down to the River Person having similar dialogue styles and being wary of Gaster, as Gaster seems to be wary of the Forgotten Man. Number 3, Deltarune's Gaster. This theory basically says that when Gaster was shattered across time and space, the Gasters from other worlds were also shattered. In this case, Dr. Gaster was a therapist who Chris knew before he was erased from existence. This would explain why Gaster considers the eggs to be an issue, as he believes the only person who could truly rival him is himself. That's just fan and speculation. There's nothing showing that that's canon, but I think it's fun. Number 2, Grandpa Simi. This one has a lot of evidence, but someone has already made an amazing theory about this that I'll link below. And number 1, Everyman. Everyman is a strange case, since we know nothing about them, with a couple exceptions, that being that they seem to exist in Hometown, just like the Eggman also sometimes exists in Hometown. They both have man in their names, but that one's kind of stupid. They both have connections to a secret boss, and they both make their first appearance in Undertale's True Lab. Personally, I love this theory. That's my go-to. But I could also see Grandpa Simi and Deltarune's Gaster very well being the Forgotten Man. Next up, chapter names. My money's on Festival Day for Chapter 5, Roaring Night for Chapter 6 on the regular route, and Angel's Heaven for the Weird Route, and The End for Chapter 7. Other ideas I had were Overgrown Kingdom, The Shelter, and Deltarune. Finally, release dates. Chapter 5 will release mid-2026, Chapter 6 will release December 25th of 2027 or 2028, and if the Forgotten Man's dialogue wasn't a joke, Chapter 7 will release on October 31st, 2029. I hope he was lying. And that's it. That is my Deltarune. How much of it will happen? Best case scenario, 20%. But I'm proud of it. I had a lot of fun writing it, so I hope you guys had a lot of fun listening to it. But what do you all think? Will Jockington be revealed to be friend? Will Papyrus even show up? Will the Eggman be a secret boss? Could Rousey have a happy ending? Let me know below. This video was a daunting experience to write for, especially considering I pretty much only make total drama content. I fought with myself on whether or not I should even be making this, or if I should just stick to my niche. But hey, half the point of writing is just to get better at writing, and the other half is to have fun, and I had a lot of fun making this. Let me know your own personal predictions down below. The next video will be about total drama again, but after that and maybe a couple other things, something big is coming. But be patient though, even if its time is fast approaching.